Chapter 1. Rich man, poor man, maggots don't give a fuck. 'Cause after the world rots in a ditch like a road-killed carcass, there's a period of most direct decay and primal defilement. Unrest ensues. Civilization gets burnt. Society gets a touch of the crazies. Infrastructures rot. And any modern marvel, save a weapon, is rightfully rendered worthless as a one-legged man at a barn dance. And there's more. Folks started calling it the aftermath. It was the devil riding a chariot of chaos is what it was. And that devil, he come up out of the lakes in heaps of shit to rear himself a throne right here on our brown earth. Then, a decade of rancid festering. We all got to fermenting in the aftermath. And now it's 1985. President Ford is dead. Led Zeppelin is dead. Starsky and Hutch are dead. It ain't America no more. Ain't no more the land of the free and justice for all. It's the goddamn waste world is what it come to be. Feeble attempts are made at reconstruction. Piece by shitty piece, a turd is picked up here and there and slowly smushed back together. One of the first lessons about reconstructing a world is that many folks are pissed as an old maid with a wasp up her drawers, and they usually want someone else to go fuck off and die. Last thing folks want to put up with in the aftermath is other folks' bullshit. Most of us didn't like putting up with their foolery before the shitstorm. And I caution anyone who thinks Reconstruction is a fine time for kicking off a political campaign. Beware the smooth-skinned, soft-palmed, sharp-tongued fella who promises brighter days. 'Cause most of them get hung, bled, roasted, and fed to the feral felines of Catback Alley, over in what once used to be a little old place called Fordyce. Don't matter either if the federal government didn't have a direct hand in the world's sorry demise. Most survivors ain't eager to climb back into a big old clusterfuck. 'Cause people, shit on once, ain't gonna play with the same assholes again. Me and my brothers ain't no politicians. We're killers for hire. Even in the throes of the post-apocalypse, people still have to make a living. And one of the finest ways to make a living is through killing. See, it's rather easy to run a merc outfit in the waste world since there ain't no big government or meddling law agencies to stick their boots or balls into our business. Somebody's got to handle the obligatory numbfucks who got eat up with the dumbass or struck with a meanness that'd make a razorback run to the hills. Those stupid bastards are going to get us in a deeper rut than we already done got ourselves in. They cling to the strands of the world like chiggers, blood running with madness and fevered desperation. All the good folk know they ought to be wiped from the map, but most of them folks don't want to do the dirty work themselves, 'cause they either still grasping onto some shred of morality, or they lack the balls, or they've managed to gain themselves a capitalist edge over the other despondent survivors and can afford to pay other greedy bastards to do their dirty work for them. Whatever their sad fucking tale might be, me and my brothers ain't all that interested as long as they can foot the bill. Of course, you gotta worry about other mercs taking out the competition. Not a comforting occupation if you're the nervous type. And a few years doing this work, you become the nervous type. On a near-about weekly basis, you're gonna dodge a bullet intended for your back or the center of your head, depending on the size of your competition's balls. Richard, the fly-swarmed corpse near our feet, had tried to blow me and my two brothers away. On our way back to our outpost, Richard surprised us with IEDs. Whether or not he had any balls wasn't relevant anymore.
"Tell him to stop eating the dirt,"
Skoll said. I grimaced. It makes him happy. Let him do it.
"Jerking off and busting a nut makes me happy. I guess I should whip it out."
We'd appreciate you keeping it in your pants. After a quick pull on a canteen of water, I leaned against my shovel. Hey, Crust, buddy, don't be eating the dirt. Of course, Crust didn't listen. He might have the brain capacity of a mangy dog and similar hygiene habits, but he's still a grown-ass man. And grown-ass men gonna do whatever the fuck they want, especially in the waste world. Crust is my brother. So is Skull. We're the three goddamn hillbillies cutting the shitstorm that is the post-apocalypse. Think Deliverance meets Omega Man.
Why you even insist on burying this stupid motherfucker?
Skull asked. 'Cause he deserves a proper burial. My shovel struck a solid root at the bottom of the grave. I leaned on my shovel to take another break.
I may be stoned out of my ever-loving brain, Skull said, but I definitely remember this asshole trying to cap all three our asses.
He used his boot to poke at the bloated body.
You recall that shit too, don't you, Krusty?
Crust spat out soil before his eyes lolled in his head.
Mecco? Bro. Yep. White Goldie.
Jesus, don't get him all riled up, I warned Skull. Ever since the accident right before the shit blew, Crust hadn't been able to make a toad lick of sense. Dumb bastard uttered things that not even the good stars over Hattie's Bridge could make heads or tails of. Different variations of the same old words. Every blue mountain he'd sling out a new word. Last week he added Billy Boogie to his verbal repertoire. A retard, an asshole, and yours truly may seem like a wayward trio, but we're better than most other Merc companies, which typically hire at least 12, sometimes 20 or even 100 men. We don't need more men. We're about blood. Kinfolk, that is, and always will be. Not even Skull would argue that I'd always been and always would be the patriarch and the leader of our outfit. Whether Skull took kindly to that practicality or not didn't matter a pound of flies to me. Skull may be a Vietnam vet and might have seen and done some fucked up shit, but so have I. I'd done things Skull could never imagine, and I'd done it to keep us going strong, even before the shitstorm. Things that might have destroyed most men's psyche, but not mine. I couldn't be destroyed, because I had to look out for my brothers, had to keep my kin safe at any and all cost. No matter what, I'll do what it takes, then, now, and in the future. With the back of my hand, I wiped sweat from my brow and continued digging Richard's grave. Richard was a father, husband, and winner of the ConAgra Chicken Plant Employee of the Year in 72, 73, and 74. But that was Richard's past. After the shitstorm, a lot of folks had to find new lines of work. Richard got himself saddled with the Green River Boys, a company of mercs out of Pine Bluff who stormed the armory as blue-collar scruffs and walked out Green Berets. Yeah, I said, he tried to kill us. I thrust my shovel into the shallow hole again and severed the root. Milky whiteness oozed. I kept digging. People still had to make a living, or a killing, whichever the case might be. I couldn't fault a fella like Richard trying to snuff us. Had it been the other way around, the Green River Boys getting the drop on us, the hillbillies from hell, then I certainly hoped Richard wouldn't have felt much guilt for putting one of us under. Couldn't go spouting that willy-nilly. Not only because of the bad vibes weighing down the sentiment, but out of sheer respect for my brother Skull. A guy who gets drafted and dragged off to a violent war halfway across the world and comes back to find his own countrymen rallying against him and his brothers in arms. Well, all that didn't sit well with Skull. He don't want to hear nothing about proper burials, goodwill, and peace to all mankind, or a live and let live philosophy. Though maybe everyone gets all them sentiments all mixed up. Maybe war comes first before peace can be appreciated. And maybe one has to confirm their righteous way of living before they can deliver their salvation upon another poor and lost soul. Everybody ought to figure by now that peace is nothing but a word that is sold to the idealist who ain't got no guts to fight for what the realist gifts to them, wrapped in their real sweat and blood, and tied with a silver chain and a bow of honor. A mountain codger like me done been granted plenty of time to think about such hogwash reckonings. There's always the old standby that survivors go to first. Why did the good Lord let this happen? And the believers will say unto them, it was his will. Have faith in the Lord. Do not question his almighty wisdom. That's exactly what I did. Stopped questioning it. Hell, I stopped looking at him for answers altogether. I figured if he wanted me to know pig spit, he'd have had them disciples jotted down a bit clearer. As it was, when I was a little runt, we all had to go down to the church house on Wednesday and Sundays so the fancy preacher man in his fancy suit and tie could tell us all what the hell Jesus and God and them disciples were all on about. Never did sink too deep into my little boy head. Tales of whales and furnaces and coats and folks walking across deserts didn't interest me a whole lot. Not as much as catching squirrels and stuffing them into boxes, or popping rattlers with Granddaddy's Winchester. I saw God in the murky ponds, and Jesus in the top of acorn trees. As a boy, that's where I found religion. Then I grew up to be a man, and I got to question that preacher man. All them preacher men. And especially them ones who came from the cities driving Cadillacs. Good jollies, Miss Molly. Them preachers weren't just worshiping idols. They was cruising the hillsides in 'em. And that's the biggest foible of men. So damn self-involved that we ain't got no room in our skulls for God. God ain't nothing to the modern man than another foul and corrupted weapon. A tool for psychological warfare. To frighten, control, bend, and manipulate people into giving up everything, from money and time to their very soul and common sense. Maybe that's why my brothers and I got left alive. We've been chosen as a new world trinity to help cleanse the planet of filth and yank up the rotten roots, so that in time, this land will flourish as a new Eden, where the angels on a divine slash and burn mission. Or perhaps, just might so maybe, we're 3 unlucky sons of bitches who didn't get the mercy of dying with the other 89% of the population. That's right. We're the goddamn fools that Mother Nature fucked with. Was it simple geography? We lived far up in the hills, so we didn't get the shits and drop dead? Was it sheer luck? Or was God toying with us? God, Mother Nature, free will, cat aliens from outer space. Something had fucked over the human race and was watching us survivors squirm and run about to rebuild our human heap. And we were all gonna have to be productive and contributing members of society. Or else, maggot sauce. Even an old dumb bastard like Crust might come off looking like dead weight, lying on the ground, crayon stuck in the waistband of his belt like fat, colorful 50-cal bullets, scooping loose soil up in scarred hands before choking it down his throat. But if he was a useless yellow belly, then he would have been boxed worm chow long ago. Parts of my darker consciousness ponder every day at how he'd managed to live this long. Skull and I both realized early on that Crust wasn't aware of the current world situation, and thought for the most part we were on a permanent outdoor vacation. Lucky for us, Crust did maintain one of the most valuable instincts a man could possess. The instincts to survive. And through an extension of that, the instincts to kill. Give Crust a gun and he'd pick the ward off a cat's left nipple from 200 yards, using iron sights alone. Earlier that day, we'd been on a routine sweep of the outpost. It had been Crust who'd spotted the black twist rising up against the bluff's backdrop. Since Skull and I hadn't noticed, and both agreed it was difficult to see until Crust slapped and shook us, pointing like a maniac, we dug around in one of our rucksacks and gave him a Twizzler. It was around noon when we finally got close enough to the camp. We still had plenty of daylight to observe. Skull had traded some commissary credits for a decent pair of binoculars. Charlie balls, Skull said, his code word for cannibals. Now, the first time you see a bunch of men sitting around a campfire with a butchered corpse nearby and human limbs roasting over an open flame, you get this burning, stingy itch of nausea that swells up in your gut before it bubbles up into your throat. If you can hack it, then you don't toss your belly salad all over the fucking place. If you do start hurling chunks, then at least think about doing it quietly, or else you might be getting a VIP invitation to the next Charlie Ball feast. But once you've seen that set up a few dozen times, it's about as interesting as a bad joke you've heard since youth. Just go ahead and say you've heard it before, and get on with the cock greasing, pussy licking, or whatever it is you're breaking the ice for in the first place. In our case, when dealing with Charlie Balls, it's bypassing the entire shock and moral appallment, and going straight in for dessert with a healthy serving of cherry red sauce. 8 men. That's not counting the sorry one-armed legless bastard they'd been gobbling down. Like shadows in the mist, Skull snuck up behind them, intentionally snapped a twig to get their attention. Crust and I came in from the front and one side, weapons blazing, a combat mag in my right hand and a machete in my left. Crust picked them off with a hunting rifle, and we had them cornered against a rock face like turkeys in a pen. Skull didn't bother wasting any bullets, snapping their necks with his bare hands and fingering out their eyeballs. One of the scared sons of bitches pissed his already shit-stained britches before tripping over their victim's blood-splattered torso. Made it easier for me to slice the machete across his ribcage and lop off one of his arms. I heard Skull take down another in a wake of screams. Crust picked one of the deserters off. The last one left alive was the fella I'd amputated. For shits and giggles, Skull heaved the Charlie Ball onto his feet while I stabbed my machete into his severed arm and held it over the flame. The young guy blubbered louder than a sissy girl who'd fallen into a mud hole. "Welcome to the waste world, mister," I said, rotating the arm to allow the flames to evenly cook the tender underside. The boy tried to turn away, but Skull turned his face back toward the flames. The boy closed his eyes.
"You're offending my brother,"
Skull said.
"You not enjoying his cooking?"
The tender, pale skin turned darker and tougher, charred and peeling.
"We should force-feed this stupid ass his own goddamn meat,"
Skull said.
"Make him choke to death on it."
"Bring him here," I said. Grabbing the guy by his one arm, Skull scooted the man closer. I lifted the smoking limb to the man's face. "I reckon it could use some barbecue sauce, but it's the best I could do on such short notice." The young man really opened up his lungs then, wailed like a banshee in labor, screaming till his throat must have bled raw. Flinging the human arm off the machete, I said, "I ain't gonna lie to you and tell you that surviving by any means necessary is right or wrong, 'cause the hells it ain't, son. But there's some mighty fine lines in this here sorry world that ain't ever up for crossing. And I think you being a fellow human being would have known that."
"Fuck you, man. Fuck you. You sick fucking bastards. Jesus, man. Fuck."
With a kick of his boot, Skull shoved the guy onto the campfire. After falling face first into the flames, he had trouble getting out, seeing how he was one arm short and surely delirious from blood loss. His screams weren't as loud this time, but that's only 'cause he'd ruined his voice from the previous screamathon. The guy managed to scramble away from the flames, but Skull kicked him in the ribs, rolling him back into the fire. The scumbag gave up, went limp, then rigid, and burned. The three of us went to work gathering their Charlie Ball supplies. That's when we heard the moan. These assholes' dinner was still alive. I lifted my machete over the guy. He nodded and I brought the blade down on his neck, severing his head. That's when Richard got the drop on us, tossing several Molotov cocktails full of styrofoam and jellied lotion. One of the glass bottles shattered directly under my feet. The jelly and styrofoam clung to my leather boot and sent me into a do-si-do dance trying to douse it. Meanwhile, Richard opened up fire with an M16. When Crust hit the dirt and rolled, I thought for sure he'd been hit. Skull must have thought the same, 'cause suddenly that grizzly bear stature came rumbling out of the gorge, barreling toward Richard. How the hell Skoll didn't take any bullets and buy the farm is a mystery. Maybe Richard was a lousy shot. Only seconds passed between Crust hitting the ground and Skoll wrapping his meaty hand around Richard's neck. One twist. One snap. It was all over. Crust was fine. He'd taken cover from the fire by stopping, dropping, and rolling.
"That's for if you catch on fire, retard,"
Skoll hollered. "Simmer down," I said. "We're all alive."
"Look at this shit,"
Skoll said, pulling back the green nylon mask of the would-be assassin. I recognized Richard and shook my head. We finished the grave shortly after sundown.
"Let's face it, bro,"
started Skoll.
"We're giving them river boys a run for their money. Why else would they be sending Richard to hose us? I'll tell you why. It's 'cause we're cutting into their pocketbooks real deep like, taking the money and running to the hollows with it. That old geezer Paul Wilson is going to be rocking a hole in the armory when he gets word that we put it to Dick."
"It's a sad world, brother, but in a sense it feels rather good," I said. "Gets us closer to the old days."
"How you figuring that shit?"
"Us and the river boys might be creating the first competitive market in the waste world. Before we know it, the rich city boys will be opening up some of those highfalutin burger joints and department stores."
"The fuck you say?"
Skoll said.
"Ain't no city slickers round these hills."
"I reckon you got some truth there."
"Maybe we should think about getting business cards,"
Skoll said.
"and a telephone number. And fuck, while we're at it, we'll hire one of those little airplanes to write advertisements in the air. But we'll have to come up with a better name than Them Brothers, the hillbilly, baby killer, and retard who do shit for loot."
It was true that we didn't have a fancy name for our band of misfits. Instead, we changed our names from Rick, Scott, and Christopher to Rex, Skoll, and Crust. Call us eccentric, but we like being unpredictable. The head honcho of the River Boys, Paul Wilson, must have sent Richard after they got word of the apple pie work we were doing in the Arklatex region. Course, cleaning up riffraff, Charlie balls, child peddlers, and slave drivers and a mess of other waste wads was something we did voluntarily as a public service to the fine state of Arkansas and the nearby regions. We'd been known to cross over into the plains of Oklahoma and the deltas of Louisiana and some parts of northeast Texas. We learned to steer away from West and South Texas due to the ruthless warlord conflicts chewing up the Lone Star's guts from the inside out. Bunch of oil tycoons and hardened cowboys turned to bloodthirsty vultures. Waste wads came in a variety of flavors, since they could be any race of humanity, mixed with any amount of immorality, depravity, and pure madness, all running scared and dangerous. Leftover white trash punks and Nazi sympathizers, New Age satanic anti-Christian pro-pagan fundamentalists, juiced up outlaw bikers with more ink than skin, zealous free love hippies too, skirted the draft and strangely managed to evolve into quasi-sophisticated gurus who deemed themselves the earls of the old world. Some rumored to be working as pharmacists in more populated settlements. And then there was the obligatory unorganized roving gangs of desperate folk. Savage, brutal, rapist, murdering scum. It's part of their job description, I believe. And no true dystopic landscape is complete without their filthy deeds teaming up out of the festering boils of society's ugly underbelly. We might be contract killers, but we got clear lines drawn in the dirt. We got standards. Cross them lines at your own peril. If you ain't gonna at least pretend to act like a civilized member of this new world, then you just need to bleed out and die. And if we can manage it, we won't waste a bullet on your worthless, scummy ass. Skoll can sneak up on a man and slit his throat better than any of them Chinese assassins. Give Crust a crossbow and he becomes a demented Robin Hood. The three of us lowered Richard's corpse into the hole. Together we shoveled the soil over his remains as the last scraggly rays of sunshine crept away and gnarled shadow fingers scraped the stony soil. He'd been a rich man at his death.
a tiny sack full of precious metals and quarters in a satchel beneath his shirt, and one tiny, stained, coppery-colored photo of his youngest daughter, Amelia. The little girl appeared no older than 9, wearing a pretty sundress and a yellowed rosebud in her dark hair. Had the poor girl died from the germ? Or had she lived only to be subjected to the hellish cruelties of this godless plain previously known as America? Child sex slavery was a booming business in certain sections of the country, with Atlanta being the capital hub. We 3 hillbillies might have some questionable motives, but bringing unjust suffering to children was one taboo we kept clear from the Arklatex. And if we ever caught a fella, or a bitch, looking to peddle children, we had creative ways of dealing with them there assholes. There's a stretch of cracked highway, out by Highway 165 near Russellville, that has 7 human skulls growing up out of the ground. 5 scummy men and 2 heartless bitches. The rest of 'em is buried neath the ground. The vermin took care of the heads, leaving behind what Skull affectionately called Skull Row. Skull knelt beside Richard's body, his hands pawing at the man's brown welder's jacket and finding a roll of quarters. Using the handle of my shovel like a prodding stick to knock the roll from Skull's grip, I shook my head. We ain't stealing the man's loot. He's a rotten heap of meat, man. He earned it, fair and square, I said. We ain't gonna take it from him. Besides the clothes on his back, it's the only belongings he's got left. Not like the goddamn bugs can buy whiskey or bullets with it, dumbass. Ain't no ferryman charging more than 2 coins for a lift across the black moats of hell. We're hired guns, I said, not highway bandits or grave robbers. Skull stood. He bowed up. Shit, brother. I'm seriously considering a career change. Kneeling down, I picked up Richard's M16. What the fuck, dude? We can't take his loot, but we can take his peace? He didn't earn the gun, I said. It was stolen from the U.S. Armory. Your distorted rationalization is worrisome. Some majorly warped shit brewing in your head, brother. Crust knelt to smooth the dirt. Heaven? With Papa? I grimaced. That's right, buddy. Heaven. Where the good folk go. Chapter 2. There's this little settlement in south central Arkansas. Used to be one of those newfangled strip malls that started popping up everywhere like warts on a witch's back. The developers had called it Grot Hill Shopping Fair, being that it was located on Grot Hill Street. But folks around here nowadays just call it Grot Hill, or to others, the Grot. Since Arkansas established itself as being a major producer of bricks back in the 19th century, it wasn't difficult for the townies to gather up enough bricks from nearby brickyards and construct a 6-foot wall around the entire shopping center. The layout of all the buildings, including a Radio Shack, Dillard's, Kmart, Marvin's Toy Box, Diamond Joe's Records, and more, formed a horseshoe around a grassy courtyard. It made a picturesque safe haven for the post-shitstorm survivors. A tall, gaudy sign that once read, Grot Hill Shopping Fair, now reads, Trespassers will be shot. 2 guards in full black riot gear and World War II gas masks are perpetually positioned as sentinels on the sign. And that ain't counting the 2 watchtowers they built out of bricks and stones dragged from a nearby quarry. Ignoring the threatening sign and armed patrols, it's a friendly community. They got a bar, too, right at the far east end of the parking lot, remote from the horseshoe. The Crud House Saloon. Finest damn place to tie one on. Back in the day, before the shopping center sprung up, it was a general store ran by old man Wayne Walters. That old man could whip up some of the best homemade pork rinds in the tri-state region. Always told me the secret was to flay them squealing piggies while they were still alive. There's a spice of life, he'd explained. Gets the blood real tangy and seasons the meat with that Mary so sweet adrenaline. It made sense, too.
Right before you die is when you feel the greatest. When you see, talk, and act the most lucid. Must be something in the blood then. Stars over Hatties knows I've been there enough times in my life. I'd have to take my boots off to count 'em. Used to, decades back, come down from the hollows, place we called Hattie's Peak, and come down to the foothills to replenish supplies. And I'd stop in for a hot Dr. Pepper and a helping of those famous cracklins. Old man Walters was usually sitting up on his front porch swing with a banjo, strutting away, playing bluegrass. Those standing in the lonesome Kentucky blue rain type ditties. I'd always sit down for a spell right next to him and enjoy my snack while tapping my foot. The darkest hour is just before dawn. Still darkness falls around us, and we must journey on. He'd take a breather from playing his banjo to tell me the latest racist jokes circulating through town and puff on a corncob pipe. Frequently had to remind that old coot that his jokes were as corny as his pipe. That racist old coot blew his brains out when the shitstorm came. Said he did it right out back of the store in the pig pen. By the time anyone found him, the piggies had eaten him down to the bones. He'd still had a cast iron skillet full of grease on the wood-burning stove in the store. The wood-burning stove still took up residence in the Crud House Saloon, our base of operation. A stuffed razorback head mounted to the chimney sneered at the patrons. Skull had taken to calling the head Porky shortly after we'd arrived in Grot a few years back. We decided to stay put in Grot Hill rather than to return to our cabin in the hills, seeing as how we felt it'd be wiser to live in a community than alone. And when a whole slew of infected folks started migrating up into the hollows, we'd surely made our decision to vamoose. The dive was a hell of a lot shadier than when it belonged to Walter. Racist jokes still lingered, but shady is where we'd learned to feel most at home these days, especially since we'd built a reputation for ourselves as soldiers of fortune. What else had we? Find a gentleman's club, smoke Cuban cigars, and all discuss the ugly problems afflicting this delicate world like we were all masters of the universe? I reckon I'll hang my hat up here any old time over than being in a room full of stuffy britches. People in the near regions knew if they wanted a dirty deed done, then they come see me. I'm the front man. Hell, we three hillbillies done left a trail of corpses behind us. People come from hundreds of miles away to either hire us or kill us. One policy we uphold, though, is that we don't take contracts from Grot Hill residents, and we don't let other mercs and thugs come into our territory. For that policy alone, we get to drink for half price at the saloon, and we earn our keep by scaring off any wastewads that can't read the big old sign. It's not our Washita mountain home, but it offered the best comforts this busted world can afford to spare. A motorcycle roared into the open town gates, and after its 45 cubic engine snarled a couple times, it went quiet. Tonka D, a black fella as big as a sumo wrestler, climbed off his monstrous Road King with the modified seat to carry his fat load. The man immediately commenced pumping his chubby fist toward the night sky while casting a shit-eating grin round the Grot Square. That fella could have been a rock star before the shitstorm if I didn't know any better, all brimming with violent charisma. "Honkies, y'all be praising a brother tonight when y'all know what we done got." The folks in the bar and the folks in houses come out to take a look at the biker. A convoy of bikes came dragging a couple utility trailers into the center of town. "That's sure right, suckers. We got us some genuine black coal ready for the cooking." Tonka's victorious announcement spread excitement like a contagion, causing other bystanders to erupt into shouts and hollers. Other bikers from the plant cathedral started grabbing armfuls of coal from the back of the utility trailer. "Fill them gens," Tonka said, referring to the backup generators that run off a coal water slurry. "We need to get us some Hendrix or some Brown flowing in the air this evening, y'all." The bikers got busy too, because Tonka was the sergeant-in-arms for the Plant Cathedral Motorcycle Club, Didn't none of them want the Reverend Plant to get word they were giving Tonka any lip. The generators would be cranked up soon as the slurry was mixed. With the payload they had brought back, the gens could run a mighty long time. There'd be a good old post-apocalyptic hoedown tonight. On most evenings, you'd only find the regulars lounging around in the crud house. Trode Haskell invariably at his back table with a candle and scrap paper, sitting there, waiting for someone to ask him for info. Matt Sawyer, perpetually rehearsing for a role in a Herschel Gordon Lewis film, with his blank black mask and gloomy telltale eyes. The dull, smoke and grime-stained wall behind Matt was plastered with movie posters of Blood Feast, The Wizard of Gore, She-Devils on Wheels, and Scum of the Earth. Some tall, muscular bitch, who for all anyone knew might have been a really ugly man at one time in her life, always sat with a piss-colored drink in her hand and stared at the dartboard like it was the holy grail containing all the answers to life's asked questions. She never talked, and she never played darts. Matt said she always settled her debt. I had personally noted that on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays, she was religiously absent. But nights when the coal slurry sloshed through the gens and the jukebox was aglow, the crud got stacked wall to wall with the Mike whiskeys and Merry Weathers. They'd cram in here and start drinking like tomorrow had already been forecasted. Last day of the world. And for many of 'em, they'd wake up in the morning wishing and praying that it would be. Turn into damn vampires in their sleep. Not want to wake up in the daylight and fear the sun. All they'd want to do is crawl into a noose. Folks like my brothers, me, and the regulars got to figuring those Mike whiskeys didn't much belong in the crud. Wouldn't see a pinch of hide of 'em when the joint was in the dark. Then the lights and the music come on and they're piling through the doors. A bunch of chattering woodchucks that don't know their knees from their assholes. And they start thinking we all gotta censor ourselves. "We're in mixed company now," one of them would say, as if they weren't a Mike whiskey themselves. And when I'd respond with the evil eye, they too would get offended. It was some time near the midnight hour when a man named Jack Tabbitt took up the stool next to me and thought I'd want to shoot the shit with him about his 16-year-old son getting hired to work the manual pumping station. Well, I didn't much give a goat's pecker about him or his boy, but his yarn reminded me that my bladder needed to be emptied, so I silently excused myself, shuffling for the bathroom. And as I sat there on the toilet, staring idly at the pumpkin orange stall door, I read the latest poetic verses scrawled into the wood. Grot for titties. Come for mayor. Lick a stinkfish. And the most profound one of all, pussy, pussy, pussy. There was a time back in the early 50s when pussy had been a 24/7 conquest that led me from Arkansas to Texas to Mexico and all over the Midwest and South. Found myself in some of the roughest dens of sin this side of the Mississippi, places I reckon the devil himself don't go. But that's the places you go when you're looking to find yourself, 'cause you gotta lose yourself first. Got the tastiest flavors from the rainbow. Pink, purple, brown. But the greatest of all had been red pussy from a Cherokee woman named Red Moon Manna. Hell, she'd tasted and fucked so damn good, I tried to make her my wife 8 years later, after I got out of the Huntsville slammer for killing her daddy. If they hadn't have thought it self-defense, then I'd have probably still been in the big house when Cale Hirsch and his lunatic radicals opened up their cans of instant pandemic. Behind them Texas walls and working them crop fields till knuckle skin peeled and souls bled raw might have been where I started finding something out about myself. Till this day, though, I can't tell you what it was I found. In 1967, on the day they let me out, I took her back to the Ouachita Mountains where we lived happily for 2 years before she died from an overdose of Valium and moonshine. I sure the hell knew how to pick 'em. And then there'd been Karina Graves, my dystopian love adventure with bonus mind trip. Some memories are best forgotten. If only I knew which ones.
The bathroom door slammed open. Feet shuffled inside. A girl's squeaky voice sliced the thin walls, and the smell of lavender pierced the stench of crusty feces and dried urine. "Strip it all," Skull's gravelly voice bit out. The girl let loose a nasally giggle. I peered through the gap between the stall door and frame. Sarah was the farmer's daughter, and she's been wanting Skull for a solid 2 years. She must have had a birthday. Girls weren't allowed to sell themselves until 16 years of age. Sarah backed into the wall-mounted sink, her hands behind her, fingers curled under the rim. She was bracing herself for Skull's onslaught. Shit. Sarah bit her bottom lip and gave Skull a very intense fuck-me look. "You bad, bad wolf." My cock twitched, got instantly erect. Crying Betsy's. I needed to get laid. Skull tore open her button-down blouse. Buttons popped from the fabric. Girl squeaked. Skull grinned. Small, perky tits. Pretty tits. Inwardly, silently, I groaned and grabbed my dick. Sighing, I stroked. Skull gripped each of her breasts, kneading them like dough. He slid her skirt up over her silk-covered ass. Kneeling, he drew her panties down her slender and tan legs. He tossed them. The panties sailed over the stall door and landed on my thighs. Still on his knees, Skull buried his face in her groin. Sarah jumped as if she'd been stung. Then she moaned and screamed and moaned some more. I couldn't even remember the taste of pussy, the feel of it on my tongue, my lips, the scent on the tip of my nose. Fuck. I needed to fuck. The stall door shook as Skull rushed Sarah against it. Again she squealed, but never a word of protest. Wet slurping noises and high-pitched nasally cries. Thoughts of Skull mutating into the wolfman and devouring Sarah whole, literally eating the sweet flesh right off her bones. But Sarah wasn't whimpering in pain or begging for her life. For a supposed novice, she seemed to be enjoying herself a little too much. I lifted the silk panties to my face, examining them carefully. The front smelled musky, a mixture of sweat, urine, and girly juices. So that's what pussy smells like. I sighed. Those silk panties were the softest thing to touch my skin in such a long time. The stall started to buck and vibrate. The thwap of fucking replaced the hungry slurping noises. "God damn!" Skull's voice cracked. His breathing was erratic. A low growl. "You worth more than 2 credits, baby bitch. Gotta make this cunt top shelf. Keep fucking it, you bad wolf." I could almost hear the cheesy twang of porn music in the background. Swallowing hard, I wrapped Sarah's panties around my cock and started jacking, but I replaced Sarah's body inside my head with Red Moon Manna. I leaned back against the porcelain toilet tank, straightened my legs, and pumped my dick, breathing hard, stroking, drooling, refraining a deep moan. She was so beautiful, so tiny. She always smelled like black licorice. God, I missed her. If only I could see her one more time. But she's dead. Rotting. Festering. Dead. My mojo started going limp. I tugged faster, harder. The stall door vibrated. A loud smack. Sarah's body smashed the stall door, her breast visible in the gap. A cute pink and erect nipple, pushing, squeezing into the narrow space between the frame and stall door. Skull growled, "I'm gonna rip you a new fucking asshole." The stall rocked harder. "Oh shit! Shit, shit, shit,
Sarah screeched.
Shit right,
Skull said.
You got your nasty slut shit all over my clean dick.
A hand smacked skin. I closed my eyes again, wrapping the panties tighter around my throbbing cock. Visions of Karina, her buzz-cut hair, lean, naked, muscular figure, and firm tits, those shapely legs, camo and battle fatigues and leopard panties, never white. She straddled mighty fine lines between deadly and sensual.
Fuck me. Harder,
Sarah screamed. Karina mounted me. Her thin, taut lips pulled back into a domineering grin. My fist tightened around my cock, the soft silk pressing against the firm, hot flesh. Karina rode me hard and fast.
Oh, fuck,
Skull shouted.
Fuck, yeah.
Panting, flapping sounds echoed off the walls. It was then I realized even my hand was making noise as it smacked against my inner thighs.
God, yes.
Sarah's voice was distant and dreamy.
I'm doing good.
Fuck yeah, baby bitch.
Sarah screamed. In pain? Karina slammed down on my cock. The tip of my dick burst with thick spurts of jizz that soaked into Sarah's panties. I closed my eyes. A girlish squeal. Another smack of skin. The bathroom door opened and closed. They were gone. With a deep breath, I used the panties to wipe the remnants of cum from my cock before stuffing them in my pocket, pulled my pants up, and opened the stall door. Skull stood there with nothing on but a shirt and bandolier stuffed with 7.62 rounds. White boxers with pink hearts sat low on his hips. His half-staffed Johnson poked through the opening like a worm from an apple, curiously looking about. The tip and shaft glistened.
I love you, brother. I do.
His eyes were glazed over. A hand absently slipped down to his cock. He wiggled his dick from side to side.
I swear it. I fucking love you, dude.
His green eyes widened. The fucker is certifiable. Did I mention that already? I made damn sure I didn't make any sudden movements. Did I offend him by eavesdropping on his fuck session? Somehow I doubted it. Skull stepped closer. His neck craned. He wasn't guarding himself. A quick gut punch, then an elbow to the back of his neck, and we'd be done with this fucking Mexican standoff shit. But if he wasn't guarding himself, then he wasn't looking for a fight. Or was he just fucking with me?
You're the best fucking brother I got. I mean, other than the stupid one.
His face so close now I could smell Sarah's rancid juices on his breath. It was, obviously, a lot more intense than the odor that had dribbled into her panties. Back off, Scott, I said in a low tone. He chuckled, blasting me with more of that nauseating stench. How the hell could he enjoy eating that filthy twat? Feeling something against my hip, I looked down and saw Skull was rubbing the tip of his dick against my pant leg, cleaning Sarah off his cock. Skull grabbed me into an embrace and pushed me to arm's length. His eyes narrowed.
But there's something I need from you.
His massive hand trailed down my side and shoved into my pocket. Pulling Sarah's panties free, he smiled.
Can't have you stealing my girl's underwear.
He smacked the back of his hand on my shoulder.
A little creepy, bro. Just saying.
Skull held up the panties, noticing the fresh, wet splash across the silk panel. He shook his head.
You need to get laid, man. 'Cause this shit...
He held the panties at eye level, dangling them tauntingly.
Is seriously fucked up.